Mr. Miller, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thanks for that very nice introduction. Thank you for the invitation, the opportunity to be here on what's really a very beautiful day in New York City. So I'm enjoying it. I do appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to what looks like a very interesting and diverse audience, and I'm sure an audience with many questions about our efforts in Iraq, and particularly, as I was asked, to try to focus on sort of how we see things going forward. And I'll be happy to do that, but I thought what I would do is start with a little bit of context in terms of what we have been doing, how we've been operating, and then sort of the kinds of changes that are taking place. As you know, the brief history of the last several years, we did, as was mentioned, reopen our embassy in 2004. At that time, we returned sovereignty to Iraq and really began to try to work in the background to help Iraq stand up. Unfortunately, as you also know, Iraq then experienced a very difficult period, a period of considerable violence, and so we had to reassess our approach to assisting Iraq, which is what happened, has come to be called the surge. And fortunately, through a number of factors, and I'd be happy to discuss those with you during the Q&A if you'd like, but a number of factors came together and I think really did begin to stabilize Iraq. And so the Iraq that exists today, I think, is now actually on a pretty solid path of stability and progress. And I think the institutions are doing well, and I think there's great hope for Iraq's future, not to downplay the seriousness of the problems that Iraq still faces, and that's what I'll really focus my remarks on. But as was mentioned, tomorrow will be a watershed day in Iraq's history, and certainly in the post-Saddam period, because tomorrow is when the first milestone of the new security agreement comes into effect, and that milestone is that U.S. forces will, by the end of the day tomorrow, by the end of June, withdraw from all Iraq's cities, villages, and towns. And if you've been following the news, the media and sort of the discussion of this issue for a long time, at least for several months, there's been a lot of speculation and discussion as to whether, in fact, Iraq is ready or whether, in fact, the U.S. is going to be in a position to actually have withdrawn from Iraq cities by tomorrow. Well, I think that question has been answered. It's certainly in recent weeks, and over the weekend, a number of appearances by General Odierno and Ambassador Hill and others have confirmed that, yes, in fact, we are planning to and will withdraw our forces from Iraq's cities, towns, and villages by the end of June. And I think that's a very important fact, and it's important for us. It's also very important for the Iraqis, because it really does represent a kind of a new era in terms of Iraq's responsibilities for its own future and for its own country. I mentioned the security agreement, and I might just recap a little bit about the transition that got us to where we are now. Starting in March of last year, when we knew and everyone was agreed that the UN Security Council resolution under which U.S. forces, actually the coalition forces, multinational forces, Iraq, under which they were in Iraq under a UN mandate, that mandate was due to expire at the end of last year, at the end of 2008. And everyone was in agreement not to renew the mandate. It had been renewed sequentially each previous year because at that point people felt that Iraq was not in a position to stand up and take care of its own internal security, and so that mandate had been renewed. Well, last year the Iraqis indicated that they did not wish to see the mandate renewed. We agreed with that. The other members of the coalition agreed with that. And so starting in March of last year, we launched a very intensive negotiation with Iraq to develop a framework for us to continue to provide security and other support for Iraq after the mandate expired. Two documents came out of that. One was the one we just referred to, the security agreement. The security agreement lays out a number of steps that will take place, the first significant one of which was the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Iraq's cities, towns, and villages by the end of June, and then goes on to take further steps, ultimately culminating in the withdrawal of all U.S. forces from Iraq by the end of 2011, which is when the security agreement concludes. It covers that period. Very importantly, parallel to the security agreement, we also negotiated something called the Strategic Framework Agreement. The Strategic Framework Agreement, you can sort of say, is the civilian counterpart to the security agreement. And what that does is it lays out a number of areas in which we are committed to work with Iraq to help Iraq develop the civilian capacities that it needs in order to succeed across the board, whether in government, in economics, in terms of civil society, and all the other aspects that come with the new kind of structures that have come to be founded in Iraq. And so as the security agreement goes forward and ultimately plays itself out by the end of 2011, the Strategic Framework Agreement continues indefinitely, and it defines a partnership between the United States and Iraq in which both sides will work together primarily to help Iraq stand up the capabilities it needs to succeed. And so that partnership will include things like educational exchange. It'll include things like economic development, diplomatic support, and I'll talk a little bit about some of our diplomatic support efforts for Iraq. It'll be everything from health to environment to telecommunications, all areas where Iraq, due to its recent history, really has lagged behind and really needs to do a lot of catching up. And they're very eager to work with us and to draw on our expertise and capabilities to help them close that gap that they've suffered because of their recent history. And so what you will see going forward is U.S. efforts in Iraq much more focused on these kinds of civilian capacity development or social or economic capacity development efforts. And so I think you'll begin to see the center of gravity of our Iraq policy shift from a security focus much more to a civilian capacity development focus. With that, then let me just lay out some of the key issues that Iraq faces, and these are Iraqi challenges, but they're challenges that we're committed to help Iraq work through, and also in cooperation with other players. The UN has been increasingly active in Iraq, and we have strongly supported that effort. The EU has been active, and there's a growing effort by non-governmental organizations, the NGO community, to get involved in and to help Iraq. And so by no means do we see ourselves as playing a preeminent role or in any way being the major player. We really think that there's room for a number of other players, particularly the international institutions, to play a key role in helping Iraq now address the challenges that it faces. And let me just lay out a few of those just as a way to maybe get some issues on the table to have a discussion about. One area that they're currently focused on, and they are a democratic society, so as you can imagine, it's an important area, and that is the expected national elections, which are now being targeted or being planned for January of next year. This would elect a new Council of Representatives, and that Council of Representatives would select the Prime Minister. And so you have really the national leadership is up for election or re-election, depending on how the results go. And it's a very interesting process because it follows on the heels of what just happened last January when Iraq had its provincial elections. And the provincial elections, of those of you who maybe follow Iraq in some detail, would be aware, the provincial elections were a very interesting exercise and had a very interesting outcome. Because what happened in the provincial elections is they changed the system slightly, but in a very positive way. The system became what's called an open list system. That sounds very technical, but basically what it means is that candidates' names appear on the ballot, and you can actually select which candidate to vote for. The closed list system, which is how they had held the previous provincial elections, is one in which the party lists the people that they have on their slate, but the party determines which ones get elected, number 1, number 2, number 3. Open list system, you can choose number 6, number 7, and vote for that person directly. So what happened is there was a much greater deal of accountability in the provincial elections that just took place. And the general result was that the incumbents tended to lose because the voters felt that the incumbents were not doing enough to help them, to provide services, to do the things that they wanted government to do for them. And so that was kind of a wake-up call to the Iraqi politicians that they really are now being held accountable. So now looking forward, the Iraqis will have their national elections in January. It's not yet decided which system they will use. Again, the old system that had been used for national elections in 2005 was a closed list system. A lot of people are advocating for an open list system, which would fundamentally change the atmosphere of the elections. It would also, we believe, have the positive impact of causing the parties to seek a broader base. In other words, they would become less monolithic parties, less sectarian-based or communal-based parties. They would be looking for a broader mandate if they had an open list system. And so we think that would be a positive in terms of Iraq's developing democracy. So we'll see how the Iraqis handle that issue. It's entirely their decision, but there is the prospect that a new system could come into place which would fundamentally change the kind of the electoral dynamics of the country. A second issue which is currently in play in Iraq, which is going to be very important for the long-term stability, is resolving what's called the disputed internal boundaries of the country. Now, again, this is a bit technical, and those who follow Iraq closely might be familiar with the issue, but a remnant from the previous days when Saddam was in power and the Kurdistan region had a kind of an autonomous area that enjoyed protection under the UN. There's a series of areas along the border between what had been Saddam-controlled territory and what was Kurdish-controlled territory, and it's not yet clear where those areas should end up. Should they end up in the Kurdistan region, or should they end up in the provinces below the Kurdistan region? And it's a point of some contention between the Kurdish north and the Arabs in the other areas to the south. And it's important that that be resolved, but that it be resolved peacefully. And the UN has taken the lead on that issue, and they've recently released a series of reports that sort of analyze the history and the demographics and the politics and the geography of that whole area as a means to try to get the parties to sit down and talk about resolving these disputed boundaries. And since that time, the UN has convened 2 sessions between the representatives of the Kurdistan regional government and the representatives of the provinces south of that and the national government to begin to discuss how to resolve these issues. So it's still a contentious issue, but it's one in which the parties that have a stake are discussing it and trying to work on a compromise as opposed to resorting to violence or other means. So as difficult as the issue has been, and it's been out there now since the time that the former government was replaced, it is being amicably discussed among the parties. Another issue that Iraq really needs to address is reconciliation among the communities. Now, the political institutions are providing one mechanism for doing that. They do now have to work together in the parliament. They have to work in the provincial governments. They do have means by which now the various communities do cooperate with each other in terms of governing the country. So there are some elements in place. But there are also a number of remnant issues that really have not yet been resolved. One is how to implement de-Baathification. The previous regime was a Baathist regime, and the question is, what should be sanctions, if any, against what levels of officials from the previous regime? And, of course, the Sunni community, which was the bulk of the Baathist regime, is looking for sort of a more liberal approach, a more forgiving approach, shall we say, towards the former Baathists. And the other communities, the Kurds and the Shia, who suffered considerably at the hands of the Baathist government, are less forthcoming. And so they really need to work out, what will be the appropriate approach to those officials. There has been de-Baathification legislation passed. It's been slow being implemented, but at least that's a start. There has been amnesty legislation passed. The amnesty would apply to those who may have passively participated in parts of the insurgency, not those who actually committed criminal acts or violent acts, but those who may have passively, provided shelter or in some other way passively supported those who are operating against the government. That legislation has been passed, but again, the implementation has been lacking. So there are a number of areas in which they really do need to get these reconciliation issues addressed, and so that tragic chapter in Iraq's past history can be put aside or dealt with, and they can really focus on going forward. A third area that I think Iraq is going to really begin to have to face this year is the return of displaced persons. You may be aware that because of all the violence, both back in the 90s and again after the Samarra mosque bombing in 2006, there's been a lot of displacement of Iraqis, both internally in the country and also into neighboring countries, particularly Syria and Jordan. And so there are estimates of over 2 million Iraqis who are currently displaced. Well, as conditions in Iraq improve, and they are improving, the conditions are arising under which these people can return. But there are a number of factors that will affect their ability to really return successfully and not destabilize or in other ways not be able to successfully return. A lot of issues have to do with property. There's a lot of property in which there are squatters, in which people have taken other people's property. There are issues of services. People need to be able to have electricity and water and basic services for them to be able to return, and in some communities those are still lacking. Employment, there needs to be something for them to come back and be employed in doing so that they can find a livelihood when they return. So there are a number of issues besides security. In other words, as the security has gotten better, and it's actually reasonably good around the country, security is not a significant factor in causing people to remain displaced. But the other factors that I just outlined really are the ones that need to be addressed in order for people who can and want to return to be able to return to their homes and their home communities. So again, I think this year is going to be a significant year for Iraq in terms of addressing that issue. Another issue, the next issue that they really do need to address in order for their sort of well-being going forward is to get their hydrocarbon sector organized. They have significant oil and gas reserves, the second largest oil reserves in the world, and significant gas reserves. And those are woefully underexploited right now because Iraq still is suffering from the effects of what has happened to the country over the last several decades, and particularly the sanctions of the 1990s, and the fact that they have not yet gotten their framework together, their legislative framework for organizing their oil sector, and as a result, they're not benefiting from the kind of income they could be having if they had a vibrant hydrocarbon sector. A lot of the challenge there is getting agreement between the Kurdistan regional government in the north and the central government in Baghdad on the framework for exploiting Iraq's hydrocarbon potential, because each side has a different view as to who should have ownerships, who should gain the benefits, how it should be operated. And they've been kind of at a standstill now for a couple of years. And so we and others have been trying to provide technical advice and expertise to help them figure out the best way forward. But meanwhile, they've been losing significant potential revenues, which in today's market they really do need, that could help them address some of the fundamental problems that the country faces. And so it's an urgent issue for them now to address. And you're beginning to see some evidence of forward movement. There's just recently been, again, those of you who may follow Iraq closely, an agreement to begin exporting 100,000 barrels of oil a day out of the Kurdistan region. And that sort of represents the first major step forward in getting the central government and the Kurdistan regional government to agree on how to deal with their hydrocarbon resources. It doesn't solve all the problems, but it sort of represents a goodwill step by both sides to say that we do really want to address this. And Iraq's current budget situation, they're running about a $10 billion a year deficit this year, does argue that they should really try to begin to better use the hydrocarbon resources that they have. Another area, a fundamental area that I think Iraq really now is moving to the point where it can begin to address is the kind of fundamental economic reform or restructuring that really needs to happen for Iraq to successfully develop its economy, attract investment, and develop the kind of employment and other economic support that the Iraqis will need going forward. Iraq has inherited a typical statist, centralized, top-down kind of economy, that was typical more of the old Soviet Union or the old socialist countries. That's the kind of economy that it has had, and it hasn't really yet fundamentally sort of restructured that economy. And so they still have significant government subsidies for specific things. They have a monthly food ration, which is very inefficient, but it's something that the Iraqi people have come to rely on and to expect. They subsidize a number of essential services, fuel and food, and frankly, many services are essentially free. Electricity, basically, they don't even charge for. And that's an inefficient way to run the economy. And so they really do need to figure out how to restructure a lot of their economic incentives so that they can get an economy which is delivering for the people in an efficient way and not currently the way it currently is operating, which is very inefficient and wasteful. Along the same lines, they need to structure investment regimes because they need a lot of foreign investment. They're open to foreign investment. They're trying to encourage foreign investment. But investors don't yet see the kind of infrastructure, the legislation, and the kind of investment infrastructure that they would want to see before they're prepared to put their money into Iraq. And the Iraqis recognize this, so they're trying to work out ways in which they can put together a package that assures investors that investments made in Iraq are secure, that there will be adequate means to adjudicate any differences, that investors will be able to realize profits, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the kind of thing that in the past they haven't really had to deal with. They do recognize going forward that they're going to have to develop that. They also really need to reorganize their employment sector. Right now, the greatest amount of employment in Iraq, more than half of all Iraqis who have jobs work for the government. And that's not a way that they're going to eventually be able to run their economy. They ultimately are going to have to privatize and make it much more of a free market economy to get the kinds of efficiencies, the kind of investment, the kind of entrepreneurial activity that they will need in order to have a successful economy. They still have significant state-owned enterprises with large payrolls and that are quite inefficient. They recognize that. They realize in the short term you can't immediately just cut loose lots of employees. You're not going to succeed that way. But ultimately, you do need to be able to address the fact that you have inefficiencies in this public sector that really do need to be addressed. Now, we're helping with that. A lot of international players are helping Iraq to address these kinds of issues. Ultimately, they're just going to have to be able to sit down and figure out what is the best way to organize their economy going forward for the benefit of the Iraqi people. On the economic front, they also have some legacy issues that they need to address. One is a debt overhang that they still have from the Saddam days. They've managed to get rid of a lot of their debt through forgiveness and through other mechanisms, but some of their immediate neighbors, particularly the Gulf Arab states, still have significant debt to those states. And they need to work that out in order to ensure investors and others that Iraq has sort of the fiscal responsibility or a fiscally clean slate so that that investors and others can get involved with the country without worrying about those who might have claims on assets in Iraq. And similarly, claims in terms of the victims of the former regime, a lot of them are holding claims against Iraq, and Iraq really does need to address those claims so that, again, the international community and potential investors will see Iraq as a country that does have a good sort of credit situation and is a good place for investment. So there are a lot of elements involved in Iraq's economic challenges that Iraq does need to address, and that we're eager to help them work through. And finally, let me just mention that Iraq's diplomatic status in the region has also, it's been very important, and it's really improved significantly in recent months. And you've had a lot more international activity, diplomatic activity between Iraq and its neighbors. You've had neighboring countries opening embassies in Baghdad. You've had Baghdad opening embassies in neighboring countries, visits of foreign ministers, visits of heads of state. The king of Jordan has been there. The prime minister of some of the nearby states have been to Iraq, and likewise senior Iraqi officials have visited. And that's been a very positive and a very healthy development, both for Iraq and for the region. If you think back to the recent history of the region, Iraq really was the ostracized country. Iraq was a belligerent country. It was a country which was seen as destabilizing. It certainly was destabilizing in the region. That is now fundamentally changing, and Iraq really is being seen as a country which is bringing stability to the region. It's bringing good behavior to the region, and it really is being seen more and more now as a country that can help the region move forward. And we're obviously very supportive of that effort as well. So we are helping Iraq in terms of developing its diplomatic connections in the region. I might just go back and just reiterate that as we move forward, we will begin to see the withdrawal of American troops. The significant numbers have not yet begun to withdraw, but that will be coming soon. And as I mentioned, by the end of 2011, those troops will be out of Iraq, and Iraq will be responsible for its own internal security. But at the same time, as that goes forward, on the civilian side, we will be maintaining a very robust engagement throughout Iraq to address exactly the kinds of issues that I've been discussing, where Iraq still needs support in terms of governance, in terms of its economy, in terms of civil society, all the kinds of social and governmental capacity building that have been lacking that we're committed to continue to supply. And so that means we will be, we diplomats and those who work with us will be engaged throughout the country throughout that period, even as the headlines indicate that the military is withdrawing. The civilian side of our U.S. government effort will continue to be as robust as ever. And we do, for that, you're probably aware, we have a number of provincial reconstruction teams around the country, and these teams basically are staffed with subject matter experts that are appropriate to the areas where they're operating. If it's an urban area, it might be on experts with urban issue expertise. If it's a rural area, you'll have an agricultural expert. The kinds of experts that we think that can help the provincial and local governments in terms of standing up their capabilities. That program, the PRT program, will continue in a very robust way going forward in order to continue to deliver that help to Iraq's governments, both at the national level and at the provincial and local levels. Anyway, I think let me stop there. I don't want to take all the time to talk at you. I'd really much rather hear what your questions are and have a discussion. So, again, thank you for coming. I'm glad to see so many people coming on a beautiful Monday afternoon. Thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to our discussion.
Again, if you will address your questions to the ladies with the microphone.
Hi, thank you. I actually had a two-pronged question. You seem to be criticizing the government that they had now because of its socialist aspects. For example, the free electricity, the fact that most employees were working for the government. And you seem to be suggesting without any question that it would be superior for the U.S. capitalist system, which has the bulk of profit not go to the state to be distributed to the people, but rather into private hands, and in particular, as you alluded to, foreign hands, to have wealthy foreign investment. And I was wondering if you had some questions about that and about the imposition of the U.S. standard on a foreign country. And connected to that is the issue of, for example, people like the Chalabis, Ahmed and Salem Chalabi, and this sort of land grab that seemed to have been going on in the initial role of the U.S. in trying to place the Chalabis in high positions, with Ahmed as president and his nephew, who had no experience in anything beyond corporate finance law, to be heading up the judicial tribunal to try on criminal charges. Those are the questions. The end of my statement is the question. If you could also discuss the issue of these land grabs and whether there's sort of mafia-style allegations that have been made against the Chalabis with the murder charges against Salem, allegedly threatening a foreign minister because they were grabbing Iraq lands as a result of the roles that were handed to them by the U.S. government. So the question, in short, is if you could address the imposition of U.S. capitalist ideology onto Iraq and the related desire to get those assets into American hands. I hope that was clear.
Okay, no,
Sorry.
that's perfectly fine. I understand the question. So let me try to address both. The second one I'm not as familiar with. The first one I think is a very good question. It's a fair question. It's one that I think Iraq is unique, and so every country is unique, but I think Iraq has its own history and its own circumstances, which will ultimately dictate the kind of government, the kind of economy that emerges in Iraq. And probably, given the nature of the question, I may have overstated sort of the effort underway. The effort underway really is to provide a more efficient economy for the benefit of the Iraqi people. Now, what that will end up looking like, ultimately, the Iraqis will decide. Now, Iraq is an oil-exporting country, so Iraq does have significant public revenues which are to be used for the benefit of the Iraqi people. And so to some extent, clearly those revenues will provide certain kinds of support for the Iraqi people that one could call socialism, one could call whatever you want to call it. But the government does have revenues which really do need to be used for the Iraqi people. So whether that's through health care, education, whatever it might be, whatever best benefits the Iraqi people, that's for them to decide. So those resources need to be made available to the Iraqi people. Now, Iraq, just like every other country, also needs to have enough of an economy so that the people of the country can benefit from a standard of living that derives from that economy. So what balance Iraq will ultimately find between supporting things on behalf of the people using the government revenues and encouraging those who can create an economy that will deliver benefits to the Iraqi people, what balance they will find will obviously be up to the Iraqis. The problem right now is the incentive structure in the economy is preventing Iraq from developing an economy which will provide for the needs of the Iraqi people. And so there is a potentially better economy to support the Iraqi people if they can adjust some of the legacy factors from the old regime. And it's not that the Iraqi people currently or the Iraqi government currently is seeking to establish or maintain a socialist country. they are looking to do the best for the Iraqi people, but there are some inefficiencies that are preventing that from happening as well as it might. And so the Iraqis are getting advice from the International Monetary Fund, from the World Bank, from the UN, from other experts in terms of how to restructure their economy for the benefit of the Iraqi people. Now, you mentioned, of course, foreign investors. Iraq does believe, and I think most observers would believe, that Iraq, given where it's been, and it just has had woefully inadequate investment for decades now, given where it's been, most experts would think that Iraq could benefit from international investment. That obviously would only be attracted if the investors could make a reasonable return on their investment. Now, that, to my mind, would not be exploiting Iraq. It would be a mutually beneficial arrangement where investments would be put into Iraq by international investors that would help the Iraqi people grow their country and their economy, and the investors would get a reasonable return on their investment. So that, I think, the Iraqis would also be comfortable with. But these are questions that ultimately the Iraqis will decide. No one else but the Iraqis will determine how the Iraqi economy ultimately will function. In terms of the Chalabis, I'm not that familiar with the specific aspects of the Chalabis and what they've done. But I think you allude to an issue which is a very important issue, and that is the level of corruption that has taken place and continues to take place in Iraq. And unfortunately, it's not an uncommon phenomenon in a post-conflict environment. While things are very unsettled and there's great change going on, that there often is a significant level of corruption. The Saddam regime sort of thrived on corruption. It was built on corruption. And a lot of that, unfortunately, did continue into the new era. And it's still an issue that the Iraqis are dealing with. And if you follow Iraq, you'll know that the Council of Representatives has been very active in trying to call ministers in to hold them accountable. Everyone understands that there continues to be corruption in Iraq, and the Iraqis themselves are the first ones to say they've got to deal with it. So the kinds of activities that you're alluding to sound like they were along those lines of people who shouldn't have been given positions of authority, misused positions of authority. And unfortunately, there's been enough of that going on. But the Iraqis are seized with it. They are really trying to address it. That's another issue that they do need to resolve. I hope I sort of answered your questions.
To what extent do Iraqis consider themselves to be Iraqis today? In other words, it seems that one of the biggest impediments to progress has historically been tribal affiliations and historical differences between religions or different ethnicities. So my question is, has this sense of I'm an Iraqi instead of I'm a Sunni or a Kurd or a Shia, has that been improving in recent years or months? Or you alluded to it before, I believe, with the oil revenue sharing and things like that. Is it still one of the major roadblocks to progress today?
Well, as you know, Iraq does have different communities, and the members of those communities do have communal identities. My own experience from the time I was in Iraq, and that actually dates back several years to 2004, 2005, and certainly since that time, and I've been back many times, is that the Iraqis really do have a strong sense of Iraqi national identity. The problem has been that over time, different players have tried to use communal or sectarian identities against other communities. They've tried to use it for their own advantage. Saddam certainly has done that. The insurgents have done that. The terrorists who have been, setting off bombs in Shia marketplaces and things like that. So there have been extremists or dictators or other actors who have deliberately tried to use the fact, and it's a fact, nobody denies it, that Iraqis do have various identities, including sectarian and communal identities. And they've tried to use that to develop fissures in the society and to develop animosity among the communities. Unfortunately, the effort in a few years ago actually succeeded in raising violence to ridiculous levels. I mean, it was tragic what was happening in Iraq just a couple of years ago. I think now the Iraqis have sort of gotten or figured out what was going on, and I think overwhelmingly the Iraqi people now support the concept of an Iraqi government, an Iraqi identity, an Iraqi nationality, in which all the elements of that society will have access to their rights. They will have equitable access to resources. They will be treated fairly by their government. The institutions are in place to do that. And so I think the Iraqi identity, which I don't think ever disappeared, is now one in which that really is becoming much more dominant, and the efforts of those to try to split the society along ethnic or communal lines really has failed. In fact, in a sense, there's been a backlash. I think Iraqis have strongly reacted to that effort and are much more strongly than ever determined to have a national identity and a national Iraq that overcomes those kinds of divisions.
My question relates to attempts to probe more at a regional level. The President's enunciated a strategy of engagement. We now have withdrawal from cities, towns, and villages, and diplomatic re-engagement on the part of the Iraqis, and a whole stream of current events coming out of Iran. What are the implications for the State Department's thinking in terms of engaging countries like Syria, and what is the impact in non-conflict countries of these events?
Well, as anybody reads the papers, it's a very interesting time in the region. Just look across at Iran, and then the other kind. We just did announce the president announced that he will be sending an ambassador back to Damascus. And the president has announced that he does wish to engage Iran diplomatically. So there are a lot of developments taking place, and of course we at the State Department really are very much at the center of that, because we're the ones that sort of implement the president's diplomatic strategy. So I think those of us involved in diplomatic work are very encouraged by the fact that it looks like there will be opportunities to see if we, diplomats, have the skills, and together with the support of the president and the other elements of our society, can actually open dialogues with countries which in the recent past we've not had dialogues, to see if we can find some commonalities, to see if we can reduce tensions or at least increase understanding between our countries and our societies, and to try to get our policies set up in ways that they're less confrontational, let's say, than they may have been. So the challenge is to us. I mean, I think the door is now being opened. It's the president's decision. He's the one that sets the policy. The door is now being opened for an opportunity to engage at the diplomatic level. And I think we in the Foreign Service are excited at the prospect of being able to carry that effort forward. And I would say I'm optimistic. I think if we do our work well, there is the prospect for at least some improvement. It won't be a panacea. All the problems won't go away. But I think we can see room for improvement, and that's what we hope to be able to accomplish through this kind of diplomatic engagement.
Thank you. How will the recent Iranian election and demonstrations be expected to affect the Iraqis before and then during their election?
Well, of course, it's very interesting. The systems are quite different, obviously. And the Iraqis, I'm sure, like everybody else, are closely following what's happening in Iran. And I think what's happening in Iran will continue to play itself out. I don't think that's something that's been fully resolved yet. So obviously everybody's watching that carefully. But the Iraqi sort of electoral system is really rather different. First of all, you don't have a Supreme Council that determines, who can run and sort of is the ultimate arbiter of the system. You have a constitution and you have an electoral system set up by the Council of Representatives, and it's quite open and transparent and accessible to everybody. So I don't think the Iraqis are looking to the Iranians in terms of a model or in terms of experience, but I think the Iraqis themselves are rather excited about the prospect that they will actually have the chance to hold their elected officials accountable. And I think they're pushing their electoral officials to set up as open and transparent a system as possible. And I think if we do succeed, if we do see, which I think we will, if we do see a successful election in January of next year and a peaceful transfer of government after that election, I think that will be a major milestone for Iraq's stabilizing of its own democratic institutions. And I think that will be a very positive thing, not just for Iraq, but in general for the region to have such an event take place. But again, there will be several months, and you'll begin to see a lot of electoral campaigning and posturing in Iraq over the next several months, like you see in any democratic system. So it'll be interesting to watch as we move towards those January elections.
What you can say about perspective of participation in political life of Iraq Turkmen population? This is the first question. And second one, please. What you can say about influence Iran or political situation of Iraq today and about tomorrow? Thank you.
Clearly you mentioned the Turkmen population. There is a significant, it's a minority, but it's a significant population in areas in the northern part of Iraq. And I didn't mention it, but one of the particular issues involved in the disputed internal boundaries issue is the issue of Kirkuk. And the Turkmen form a significant population in the city of Kirkuk, which is an oil-rich city, and so therefore it's a very important area that a lot of Iraq's communities look to and want to make sure that their rights or their prerogatives vis-a-vis Kirkuk are protected. So one of the issues that's currently under significant discussion is the future of Kirkuk, and that is being discussed with the inclusion of the Turkmen community, which is a significant community in Kirkuk. In general, Iraq is a country, as those who would follow it closely know, it's overwhelmingly Muslim. It's significantly Arab, but it does have other minorities. Now, it has a Kurdish minority, which of course is also Muslim, but it then has a number of other smaller minorities, probably the largest group of which are Christians, and then it has Turkmen, it has Yazidis, it has a number of other smaller minorities. Altogether, those minorities make up about 5% of the population. Now, it's been a very challenging issue for Iraq as it's written its constitution and as these communities have tried to figure out their role in the new Iraq. Because, in a democratic society, there has to be protection for minorities, but minorities also have to figure out how to exercise their political voice in a democracy. And so that's been a process that's been unfolding. The Constitution does protect the rights of the minorities, but in some cases politically, some of the minority groups are looking for additional support or additional sort of benefits from the democratic system. And it's possible that those will come. In the provincial elections, you may recall, there were a number of seats set aside for minority communities. Not as many as the minority communities wanted, but at least some were set aside. It's possible that there would be some seats set aside for minority communities in the national elections. That was not the case. It was not overtly the case last time. They did have some set-aside seats. They might do it more overtly this time. So it's important that Iraq's minority communities feel like they're welcome in Iraq, that their rights are protected in Iraq, and that they have a political voice in Iraq. And that's something that I know all of Iraq's minority communities, we, the UN, and others who support Iraq are trying to help Iraq achieve. The second question had to do with Iran. And Iran has played an interesting role vis-a-vis Iraq. There are many in Iraq who feel that Iran has been too influential, has had too much influence. I think Iran itself has to sort of figure out what its best approach to Iraq is. I think they did see in some recent developments, for example, the provincial elections, that there appears to have been some sense in which Iraqis were exhibiting a backlash against the perception of Iranian influence in Iraq in the way they voted. So I think Iran needs to have a proper relationship with Iraq, but I think it also needs to recognize that any effort to have undue influence in Iraq is probably going to backfire, and that the Iraqi people will reject that. So I think Iran still needs to sort of work out its best approach. We understand that they should have proper relations. They're neighbors. They have a significant trade relationship. There's a lot of religious pilgrimage between the two countries. But no country should have undue influence on another. And I think Iran needs to understand that and needs to behave accordingly.
Could you comment on the security situation in Iraq going forward and the role of the U.S. military? The situation had been stable until relatively recently, and there have been recent outbreaks of violence. If violence should continue, what will that be? The control be in the hands of the Iraqis, or will the U.S. play a role there?
Well, you're certainly right. Unfortunately, the terrorists have made an effort, I think, in recent weeks to try to convey a sense in which the security in Iraq is declining. And these very high-profile, very tragic incidents are extremely unfortunate. And they're along the lines that I was discussing earlier, where they do seem to be deliberate attempts by extremists to try to conduct acts of violence which will cause a rift within Iraqi society. And from their point of view, they would like to see them reignite sort of communal tension or even violence. The good news is that despite the horrific bombings that have taken place lately, there has not been such a reaction. These acts have been rejected by all Iraqis across the board, and so they're not seen as being on behalf of one community towards another community. Now, the Iraqi security forces and the Iraqi government are taking full responsibility for the internal security of Iraq. And that's where we are, and that's where we're going. And so do not expect, and I do not anticipate in any way that the U.S. forces will begin to be involved directly in providing security internally within Iraq. Now, we are prepared to continue to provide support to Iraqi security forces in their efforts to provide security within Iraq. There are certain capabilities that the Iraqi security forces have not yet developed that they do ask us to help them with. Things like airlift, things like medevac, things like logistical support. There are these kinds of elements that are involved ultimately in successful security that are different from ground-level street patrols and doing the kinds of security that the Iraqi security forces now are taking full responsibility for. But we will continue to help develop these capabilities in the Iraqi security forces, and to the extent needed to provide these capabilities to support the Iraqi security forces as they handle the challenge of security within Iraq. Where are we?
President Obama, of course, had opposed the decision by the prior administration to intervene in Iraq and has felt that the invasion was a mistake, but inherits a certain situation. From the point of view of a career officer, can you say, you've mentioned, of course, how the President has changed our policy in terms of greater engagement with some neighboring countries, but internally in Iraq, can you delineate the ways in which policy has changed? The policy direction that you're getting is different from what it was on January 20th, and the ways in which there's continuity.
Well, of course, the President has laid out, subsequent to becoming President, he obviously, during the campaign and in earlier years, as you alluded to, expressed certain viewpoints concerning our policy towards Iraq. But since becoming President on February 27th in Camp Lejeune, and if you're interested in Iraq and you haven't read it, I would encourage you to read his speech at Camp Lejeune on January 27th, where he very explicitly laid out his policy towards Iraq going forward. And it was, to reaffirm basically the security agreement that had been negotiated under the previous administration. It was negotiated by the end of 2008. But it did lay out the kinds of milestones that we've been discussing here this afternoon. And he reaffirmed his commitment to that. And he also specifically laid out certain aspects of how he intends to implement that. He mentioned, for example, that by August 31st of 2010, our troops in Iraq will change their mission from sort of combat operations to support operations, supporting the civilian effort and supporting other aspects of Iraq and U.S. government efforts in Iraq, leading ultimately to the final withdrawal of all troops by the end of the security agreement, which is the end of 2011. So the President, I think, has been very clear about taking the policy that he inherited, and specifically the security agreement that was in force when he came into office, and implementing it in ways in line with his own vision of how we should be going forward with Iraq, and making it clear what kinds of things will now happen. He expressed his full commitment to continuing the robust civilian effort that I described, even as the military effort begins to draw down. So he has laid out, I think, a very good concept of how we can continue to help Iraq succeed, but not take responsibility for Iraq's success. We're helping them do what they need to do to succeed. And I think that's a good course going forward, because that's what the Iraqis want as well.
I have two questions. One's a negative one. I'm sorry for it, but I'm just thinking. I'm thinking of the end of Vietnam War and the helicopter lifts in Saigon. If, God forbid, what you're talking about does not take place, or it becomes so costly in lives and treasure, is there a fallback plan? What happens with troops, with money, with our foreign policy if we don't achieve success, or it's much more costly and long-term than it seems? Second of all, if the infrastructure is in such need of repair and all the other things you've mentioned, are we still having contractors doing work, civilian contractors in Iraq, or are we going to make sure we, the UN, our somewhat recalcitrant European allies, that locals will be doing most of it? Thank you.
Well, on the first question, I'm in the very good position of being able to say that diplomats do not answer hypothetical questions. So, and your second question, so no, I don't see a scenario. I mean, having been to Iraq, I've lived there for a while. I've been back every few months for the last several years. I really don't see a scenario in which the Iraqis themselves would ever embrace anything other than the kind of society that they've now, I think in their minds, fortunately have to build on. And even though you're right, there will be those who will try to continue to undermine it, I really think the Iraqis are very smart people and they're very sophisticated. I think they've figured it out, and I just don't see circumstances that would cause this really to come unraveled. There will be bumps in the road. There will be bad days. There will be decisions by the government probably that we won't like, et cetera, et cetera. These things will happen. But the fundamental direction I think that Iraq is taking, I think the Iraqis have really embraced it. And they're going to battle things out, and they're going to call each other names, and things are going to happen. But I think fundamentally they're going to stay on the same path. Now, that may be overly optimistic, but I think after what they've been through, I think they really appreciate the opportunity they now have. So, again, I can't answer a hypothetical. If things really go downhill, I don't know. But fortunately, there are people well above me in the government who will have to address those issues. On the issue of contractors, I didn't make it clear, but it's absolutely the case. We are out of the reconstruction business. The U.S. government has nothing to do with reconstruction in Iraq anymore. Any reconstruction that's taking place in Iraq is taking place by Iraqis or potentially other international donors, but not by us. And so, yes, it is entirely an indigenous Iraqi undertaking now. So there are no big international contractors, certainly none that we're supporting. Now, if the Iraqis bring them in, that's their decision. But reconstruction in Iraq is now a 100% Iraqi-run and led enterprise, and no U.S. money is going into it. What we're supporting is capacity development. We do still have assistance funds that provide experts that help Iraq develop the expertise it needs to govern and to use its resources wisely and to do the reconstruction it needs to do. So we just pay for people to provide expertise to the Iraqis to run these programs.
An earlier question referred to the issue of Iranian influence in Iraq, and I'm just wondering what your personal opinion is on what the intent of the Iranian leadership is to do in Iraq. Is it to destabilize the government? Is it to influence it in ways that, or at least to me, somewhat of a mystery? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, just like hypothetical questions, diplomats don't get personal opinions either. But nonetheless, let me take a shot. I think the Iranians themselves are still wrestling to some extent with that question. I think they would like to see themselves have a certain amount of influence in Iraq, given their history. I mean, they fought a very bitter war just 2 decades ago. So they clearly have an interest in making sure Iraq doesn't become belligerent or in some way become hostile towards Iran. And potentially I can imagine that Iranian leaders would think, well, maybe if we can develop some ways to influence what's going on in Iraq, that might help us. And that's reasonable. I mean, most countries do seek to try to have some influence on their neighbors. I think they, in the past, have overplayed that approach, and I think the Iraqis have sent the message back that we don't want to see you overplay that approach. But I'm not sure that the Iranians themselves really have come to grips with how to deal with this fundamentally different new neighbor that they have, which is an Iraq which has democratic institutions and accountable governance and transparency, and it's a very different place. And so I think the Iranians themselves are still trying to figure out how to deal with that. I think they want a stable neighbor. I think they don't want an unstable Iraq. But again, they want a neighbor that in some sense they want to make sure is not belligerent or hostile towards Iran. There's no reason to think it would be. As you can imagine, a government that is responsible and accountable to its people is not going to be causing trouble internationally with its neighbors. But again, I think the Iranians themselves are still trying to sort out just what is happening next door in Iraq and then how they might best deal with that. Well, anyway, I guess maybe we've run through our time, but thank you all very much for a very enjoyable discussion.
Mr. Minister.
Thank you.
I want to thank you very much for this, our second Herford Memorial Lecture, and I have to say the breadth of your immersion into the affairs of Iraq is impressive indeed, and we wish you well in your future endeavors. I want to also thank, I think is Mrs. Hilga Herford here? Just would like to recognize her, the widow of John Herford, and also extend our thanks to Scholastic and Hugh Rome, the president, for giving us the facility for which we've had this talk today. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you very much.